So good evening, everyone, and welcome to an evening of 3 committee meetings. So we will have community planning, environment and natural spaces, and public works and protective services. And one thing I want to mention is there will be public participation in each of these sessions. So if you have a matter that relates to community planning, please speak during public participation. Environment and natural services, same with public participation at that point, and then protective services as well. So we have 3 presentations this evening, and we'll hear 2 tonight, or sorry, 2 right away, and then 2 during the public works and protective services. But before we begin, I do want to acknowledge that we are on the traditional territory of the Coast Salish people, and particularly the traditional territory of our near neighbors, the Chiana First Nation and also the Sauk First Nation. And so with that, I will call to order the community planning meeting for February 13th. And as a start, are there any additions to the agenda? And hearing none, if I can have a motion, Councillor Craig.
Yeah, I just wondered if we could add something under business arising, just to touch base on this, the land sale to the CRD, the buffer land sale to the CRD, just to ask about that. And I don't know if Jay will mention any update on the strategic plan at some point when we bring that to the public.
Okay, so just for clarity, Councillor Gray, you're talking about the land sale that was, what should I say? Abandoned, sure. Back in October of 2021, you want to talk about that?
I just want to ask a question with regards to one of the points in the minutes, that there's a document we could share, so I just wanted to ask about that.
Okay. Okay. And you're asking me about the strategic plan. I'll add a note about that in my councillor's update, so please remind me if I somehow forget.
Thank you.
Great. Okay, and if there are no other additions, can I take a moment or have a motion to Councillor Donaldson and second by Councillor Gray? And any discussion? Hearing none. Call the question. All in favor? And opposed. Okay, so our agenda is passed. So we have 2 presentations. Mr. Bruce Summers, are you here? There's Bruce.
Thanks, Terry.
So Bruce, thanks for being here tonight. You have 10 minutes and the attention,
Okay.
the attention of the community planning meeting.
Just so you people have a chance to look a little bit at the information that comes from our club. I'm not used to having people behind me. This is a very unusual situation. I apologize for that. I've come to this planning meeting looking for support for having our annual car show here in Metchosin. I'm a member of the Early Ford V8 Club. The Early Ford V8 Club is part of a pretty near worldwide organization, chapters. Started, of course, in the United States where hot rodding started and that sort of thing. And we're the Victoria chapter, the 109. We are probably the oldest presenter of car shows in Victoria area. Everybody knows about the Deuces. That was done first by our car club before it became an independent organization. We have, for 40 years, been doing car shows. We have a lot of supporting sponsors and that sort of thing. We're a non-profit organization. All of the funds that we've ever raised go for a bunch of programs, everything from the Salvation Army, the food bank. I run a program in the high schools for the mechanics programs. We've been giving small cash donations of $500 to the shops like Belmont and all the different ones in the Victoria area. We've done 6 so far. And that helps that class get something a little bit special for the program. And what happened last year is our show got very big. Our 40th was a big deal. We had it at Heritage Acres where we've been for about the last 25 years. Prior to that we were at the Forest Museum in Duncan. And the Artifact Society is a pretty ideal situation for a really nice family show because it's got the little trains and that's their big day when we come to that show. But over COVID, they've suffered a lot of financial loss, and they're really trying to regroup. And like so many of us older people that ran volunteer things, the volunteers are running out. And so they're struggling right now, and it's created some real problems for us. So we decided we will withdraw from them, even though we were booked for this year. And our car club had a vote on it and said, yeah, okay, we're gonna move on and maybe not even have a show. And unless somebody stepped up to say they would chair the show, they decided there wouldn't be a show this year. And Laurie Stevens and myself live here in Metchosin. I just live down in Woody Beach. We just came up and thought we'd take a look around and see how feasible it would be to have our show move here. Now, Peter Hammond and I started a show years ago on Metchosin Days. In fact, we did one right in the middle of the pitch first year. And then it moved over here in the bike area, the BMX bike area, the following year. And then after that, I think Eugene Pulland kind of took it over, and then Roddy's taken it over. So it has been coming in one form or another in connection with Metchosin Days. But now that Metchosin Days seems to have sort of run into some problems, I think it would probably be really a perfect time for some kind of event that was good for the community, and I feel this one would probably be a really good fit. We're at a time where we're trying to downsize so that it fits our volunteers. The technology this year allows us to do that. We can preload the site. We would like to have the use of that field where the old school is, the school grounds. We've pasted off and roughly measured it out. Looks like we could get about 175, 200 cars in there. Generally speaking, our show is being 200 plus cars up to 300, but I want to downsize as much as I can, so I kind of like the idea that it has a fixed limit to it. And our show is traditionally on the third Sunday in July. So it does interfere with the farmers market in terms of the fact that they've already got some problems parking there. But I think we've had enough meetings that we've sort of figured out ways we can get around that. The show itself just runs for the public from 9 o'clock in the morning to 3 o'clock. The show cars start showing up usually at 7:30. For Deuces, they show up at 3 in the morning, so it doesn't bother you a little bit, 7:30. Anyway, so the show cars start coming at 7:30, and we would be loading them into that field if we get permission to do so. We've also requested this chunk of land that I know is overflow for the market, and I think there's other things we can do about that parking. And we would like to have that area as the general parking for the people that come to the show. Now, we've never had dead accurate gate tallies, but I know that we've had as many as 1,000 people come to our show. People are usually there for an hour or two and they're gone again, but when they come to a place like this, I suppose the Artifact Society, which is it's a closed house deal, here they've got a chance to take part in everything the community's offering. So I think it would actually boost the market that day. Now the old schoolhouse is finished, and that could be open. It's right against the show. That would be nice. I've been to the arts group and talked to Betty Hildreth and Jane Hammond about maybe having something set up for that day as well for them. And they were very excited about that possibility. So everywhere I've turned so far, I've received, yeah, this could be really a good thing. So I'm hoping tonight that everybody here will decide that it would be. I better start using my notes or I'm just going to get myself right lost here. The club has $5 million liability insurance. The insurance company is the same one that does all of those thousands of local groups. That's how we can get a good policy like that. So we do have a proper amount of insurance for an event like this. The event itself requires space for, like I say, about 150, 200 show cars. The school field would accommodate that. We need space for public parking. We have that. We need washroom access. Now, I don't know if you're aware of just how much it costs if you've got to rent porta toilets, but they're just under $500 a day on the weekend. And so I've gone through all the complexes, and there's actually lots of washrooms in the school. And if we had access to those, that would make a very, very big difference to how much it costs to put on an event.
Sorry, Bruce, I just have to caution you, you're close to your 10 minutes here.
Oh, gee whiz, okay, flipping along from that a little bit then. We normally have music there, and it's canned music that we used the last year, and that fellow's already booked again for this year, so it's kind of the 50s, 60s, 70s type of music. And so that is a thing that means that we need to have a little bit of access to power. Doesn't have to be very much power. I know they were running the carpentry class over there from Belmont School, so I know they ripped a bunch out, but we just need a couple of outlets to make that work. We run a 50-50 draw that goes to the food bank, and we do that morning and afternoon. At approximately 1 o'clock, we give out our awards, and so that it's all ready to be wrapped up by 3 o'clock. I have already talked to a lot of the players here. I haven't talked to Tony yet, but I've talked to the people inside the complex, the Intact group, and is it Instinct? Yeah, Instinct group. And talked to Stephanie from the fire department a little bit about the logistics of people crossing roads and all that sort of stuff. Nothing seems insurmountable, so from that perspective, it's looking pretty good. I think probably so far I've had talks with Mayor Little and Sue Lynn about it. Stephanie, I've talked to the Mile Zero guys. They're excited as they'll get out about that. Instinct, I've got to go back and talk to Ed because he's actually working that day, so there could be a little bit of an issue there. So he seemed up okay for it, but he was busy when I talked to him. And I think probably Tony would probably be thrilled at the store. Talking to Mike and Shannon, they'd be winners at my chosen, of course. I've looked to see the times for the broken paddle. It looks like that could fit in really well. And of course, the farmers market's a big deal.
Sorry, Bruce, I do want to wrap you up.
Okay, the final decision. Here's the last thing you got to know. My club meets tomorrow. Even if everybody here said go for it, my club hasn't said go for it yet. I have to have the work base if I'm going to chair this thing again. I chaired it for 6 years, and I said I was done, but because of the situation, I said I'm willing to chair it this year if everything goes through. And it's an annual event, so if we did it this year, we would be looking forward to doing it in the future. And I think it could be a real win-win for the community right now. Any questions?
Yeah, and that's what I would like to ask the committee, if there are any questions of Mr. Summer. Councillor Jones?
That was great. You pretty much answered all of my questions. What's great about it is, as my family actually goes to vintage car shows all the time, because we are vintage car buffs, owning a few of them ourselves. And they do draw hundreds and hundreds of people. So wherever there's like 200 or 300 vehicles that you're showing, it's probably triple or quadruple the amount that come and see that. So lots of people, lots of parking that we would need. And one of the things that I was just, you were exploring the washrooms, refuse would have to be obviously taken care of. Food, do you require food, or do you have like food trucks or anything?
We've used the Central Sandwich Lions for the last few years. The Artifact Society had their own food service until they ran out of volunteers and food safe trained people. And so then we went to the Central Sandwich Lions, and they of course do Swift Sure and stuff, so they can do anything. But you've got enough food service here. The only thing that's a bit of a missing thing is in the morning, these guys are usually up at like 5 and 6 in the morning to get their cars here. So they'd like to have coffee and maybe pancakes or something. Okay. And whether or not the scouts who always did the pancake breakfast out here could be arranged with something, I would prefer it to be in-house as much as possible rather than bringing in sandwich. Just makes a little bit more sense to me. So other than that though, I think there's lots for the daytime.
Right, so just two more things.
Mhm.
So traffic control, would you provide?
Yes, we
Okay.
direct all of our own
Right.
parking and all that sort of stuff and manage it during the day.
And if you're not able to acquire the field that you're talking about, have you looked at any other places?
Nope, there just won't be a show this year.
No, so I was on the phone today just to find out, right?
I see.
Yeah, so Boys and Girls Club is an option. If it doesn't work here, it still is in the chosen, and there's a lot of property. I do have a contact.
That's interesting. I've tried to use them for options before, and there's a problem there because a lot of their clientele are under court order, and it's against the law for you to go and have a bunch of public people there.
Right?
Oh, interesting.
So I do have a call into them. And haying season will be finished by then, so there is that side of it.
Yeah.
And the other one was West Shore Parks and Rec. They did the
Yes,
show last
you
year.
can do that. It's $500 a field.
Mhm.
The lowriders did it last year. If I was in a position where I was wanting to make a big show,
Right.
then I would probably go there. Like you pay $500 for each field, and the lowriders were very successful last year. That was a great show,
Mhm.
and I was in it and all that. But that's
Okay.
not what I want to do. And if I'm going to be the guy running this thing, that's not what I want to do.
That's all I have to do. Thanks.
Great. Mary Lou?
Thank you. Thank you. Nice to see you again.
Nice to
We
see
met
you.
on February 3rd with Celine Tarnowski, the CFO, interim CAO. Thank you very much for that. The question I have is, this could be really successful, and we would have a problem with parking, which was a major problem with the Matrosen days. And have you considered park and ride from such as the St. Mary's church and shuttle buses coming back and forth? There's more parking there. Have you considered that option? No, because the farmers market is that day for sure already. You've already talked to Maca. There may be more people there. If you've drawn 1,000 people with 250 cars, with 175 to 200 cars, you may draw 800.
You never get 1,000 people there at one time. Never happens. You'd have a few hundred around at any given time. I would think that just between all of the space along the side of the roads, I know nobody really loves that, but I really think it wouldn't be that big a deal. But the parking space over here, I paced it off, and I think it can probably hold 150 cars. So they'd be coming and going out of there, especially if they're directed. And the big thing is to have somebody show them where to park. And I know that the overflow for the market has been going there, and on that day, I guess I would be asking that they don't, but you're not going to tell somebody they can't come and park in there. If they're coming to go to the market and they see a sign that show cars can park in there, they're going to park in there. But I don't think it's really going to be a big issue. But the neat part about it is if it works out okay this year, then you've already got a benchmark because we're preloading the parking because the technology is there to do that. I can find out exactly how many cars are coming and they pay in advance and there's their spot. And that is, when we were at Heritage Acres, it was wide open gate. Sometimes we get more cars than we had room for. That's not going to happen.
And just one more question, in terms, you've already ruled out outdoor loos. They're cost prohibitive.
Sorry?
Outdoor toilets, you've ruled those out.
I haven't completely ruled them out. I guess when I went over and went to the arts people and talked to Betty and them, they said, well, we've got all these toilets, how could you possibly need more toilets? And I'm hoping that maybe the 6 will be finished that are in the addition that you're building right now as well. But I do have 2 in my backyard, and those ones only cost me $70 for the day.
Okay.
And they'll come and pump it on the Monday. So I do have that option available to me, yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor?
Sure.
Well, I think it's a great idea. It sounds really exciting. One thing else, is there any chance that you could change it from a Sunday to a Saturday?
All car shows are on Sundays. I guess it happened because it was developed from a working man's society. It would be, I think it would be very disruptive to have it on a Saturday, and I don't think it'll be harmful to the farmers market. I think it'll only be a bonus to them. I realize that's the big issue. So I would say no. Anything else?
Yeah, a few questions. Okay, so you're throwing out fancy terms to me, Bruce. So preloading, by that you mean you're going to park the cars before the event starts. Is that correct?
What I mean is that up until a couple of years ago, there was no way you could get somebody to pay to come to a car show and collect the money until the technology that we have now allows that to happen. There's a fellow on Vancouver Island who's built a program that's now being used across the United States. You pay him $2 per vehicle for the use of his program, and it will let you pre-register, take the money, give us the money, he gets us $2 per car, and then it also works for picking out who's the best car and a whole bunch of other things the program can do. So that's a game changer. And that's what the guys used down in Juan last year. They knew that they were going to get about 350 cars right off the bat.
Okay.
And so by having that, you just advertise it strictly preloaded.
Gotcha.
Okay.
Okay. A question for the committee, but sorry, I have another question for you. So, Councillor Abb, do you recall how many people were at the Makers Market? I'm just curious to have like a comparison. How many people we would have expected at any time? Would it have been 300, 400?
I have no idea. Is there anyone here that might know?
Everything I've heard, it gets to the point where the parking eventually starts falling in here.
Yeah.
Okay, in this top edge of the field.
I mean, it did seem to work out. You know, I didn't notice any terrible plans. People, you know, they came and they went, and you know, it was just kind of a steady stream of people, which is probably what it would be at something like this as well. It's not like everybody lands there at 9 o'clock in the morning and stays all day.
Well, they might stay a little longer though. That's the puzzling part for me, because I would see, if I came to see that show and I found out there was a farmer's market over there, I'd leave my car right where it was and I'd go to the farmer's market.
Yeah.
So I don't know quite what to expect there, but there's still more places you could be parking the farmer's market. You could be parking along that edge of that driveway that runs down along the cricket pitch without ever getting anywhere near the cricket pitch. You've got quite a piece of land just along the edge of that driveway where you could back cars in there. But you might need somebody to sort of oversee that, to make sure that they don't start trying to drive out onto the pitch, or you might have to run a ribbon on poles down there so that they can't get out on the pitch. But all that's really viable. It's not big stuff, but you know, I could make that happen. All of the original stuff that went around the Chosen Days I supplied.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Well, people, it seems to have a way to work out. I mean, it's just, you know, one day a year, and you have it, and people seem to find a place or figure it out.
Yeah, that's sort of the way I feel about it. I think it would be positive.
One other question, I'm not familiar with how cleanup occurs after a chosen day. I expect it takes a bit of time. And same with the garage sale, that's a longer process. The question I have, I guess, is cleanup of the site, but also the surrounds as well, as we welcome that many people in. And I'm wondering if, I'm just trying to think about how maybe to address that. It just seems like a very intense day. Not that the Makers Market wasn't, but we in some ways asked the Makers Market folks to stay within a confined area. So yeah, that's something to think about.
Well, we traditionally look after the site ourselves. When we were the Artifact Society, they didn't look after that, we did.
Okay.
And in terms of the actual site, as for somebody throwing their can on the side of the road.
Okay. One further question, are all the cars gone by the end of the day?
They're gone. When 3 o'clock rolls around, you open that gate, they just, they're gone.
Okay.
So by 4 o'clock, it's basically they're gone, and it's just finishing up the cleanup and the wrap up.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks. I mean, it sounds like a great event, and yeah, it'd be great to make it happen and do a lot. So thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, Steve.
No, I just say thank you. It sounds like a great idea.
Okay.
Thanks, Steve.
Okay. Okay, now I have a question for Sue Lynn. Now, I'm just trying to think about how to address this. We have this again under correspondence. I think we can address it there. I'm not sure we're maybe ready to give it full approval, but we could give it approval in principle. And then there might be a proposal that comes subsequently, and we can look at some of the issues further on with something that's written down. Councillor Johnson.
The one thing that's still not clear, and maybe Councillor Epp can answer, or staff, is what is our fee structure for renting out the field?
Yeah.
It's like super expensive.
Yeah.
As long as we have one, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, and again, you know, the thought of cleanup came to mind is in terms of, it's not even a fee for the school, it's maybe a bond or a deposit for cleanup expenses. So
in past years with Machosen Day, as Mr. Summers said, the scouts do get involved with things like concessions, and I know right now that they're doing a lot of fundraising because quite a few of the older youths are going to a jamboree.
okay.
So that certainly that is somebody to reach out to. They also were invited back to do some refuse cleanup, that sort of stuff afterwards. So it's another service that if they had a donation to their cause,
Okay.
that might be something to consider if this is something the committee would, or council in the future, think about.
Okay, great. Okay, so my question, I'm just wondering if we have to amend the agenda. Is this something we should deal with in business arising? Or can we deal with it in correspondence? I feel like there's another step to go here before we...
So that's the question about the fee structure?
No, I think it's, the question is moving this along to the next step. I mean, I'm prepared to give it sort of agreement in principle, pending resolution of some of the questions that we might have. Again,
If I may suggest to deal with it at 8A in correspondence.
Okay,
since
that's what we can do.
it's-
Okay, great. Okay. Let's deal further with this on at 8A. Great, thank you very much. Okay. Okay, with that, I would like to ask Mr. Owen Enright to come and give his presentation.
Yeah, thanks for having me this evening. I'd like to preface this before I get into it. This is more of a philosophical sort of concept that I think it's not something that will be resolved this evening. It's something that I want to put on everyone's radar here, including the community, and something I want to speak to as a younger generation from Machosen. So changing times means changing communities, and I am discussing secondary suites within the district of Machosen. Sorry for all the text, but I will speak to this. So yeah, I was born and raised here, and I would like to continue living here. My family still lives near Weir's Beach. I'm a working professional who really values this community, its ruralness, and everything that it stands for. Yeah, I always come back in my mind to this place. And I just want to speak to, though, that housing is becoming increasingly harder to find, to rent, to buy across BC, and specifically in Vancouver Island. And my demographic is feeling that. And I do want to speak to some of the guidelines that we have in place in terms of building code. It's preventing individuals from staying in the community and forcing them to move elsewhere. But times are changing, and that means that our community needs to adapt to these changes as well. So what I'm asking for is essentially parcels of land that are under 2 acres being allowed to have secondary suites or secondary dwellings. And I'm speaking specifically in relation to family members. So yeah, let's get into it here. So I'm sure as all of you know, but I want to put some context to it, the why. So we've seen property prices absolutely soar, and really the prices here prevent a lot of people from getting into the market in Machosen. I'm fortunate enough, my parents bought here ages ago, but yeah, my demographic, I know many people who can't afford that. And really, I believe it's eroding our long-standing sense of community. And you know, this is something we're really grappling with now. And just some stats, we can look at this from 2013 up till now. Huge increase on Vancouver Island. And I would actually say this is on the shy side of things from what I have been reading. And in continuation, in BC, this is from 2018, forecasting to 2024, we're sitting about $1 million. So if we're looking at that increase since 2013, that's about 750,000 increase on average. And I'm using this as a metric. I know it is Vancouver, but I think it really puts things into perspective. So rentals from 2016 to 2023, we see from roughly $1,500 to $2,500. And I would like to speak to the fact that in BC, the vacancy rate of rentals right now is only 1.3%, which is incredibly low in considering our population increase. So I would like to speak to some of the benefits that secondary dwellings can provide for family members. Like I said, I grew up here, and I hope that me and my partner can carry another generation on within this community. And I'd like to do it on the property that I grew up on, but also while being able to look after my parents as they get older. And by building a secondary dwelling on my parents' property, it really would foster that intergenerational living, allowing my children to be raised by my parents and us to be taking care of them instead of putting them in a care facility, which our society seems to really just do. And there's many benefits of this. It's going to reduce pressures on the availability of housing, increase the sense of meaning for individuals, trust, social capital, and I really think it will, sorry, it's not fitting on there fully, but it allows for that sense of community to prosper and come forward even stronger. And I think this is interesting. As our older adult population increases, we really need that adequate housing to be available. And as I stated, that isn't necessarily the case. And we see that, loneliness, it leads to decline in function, lower health scores, overall mortality. And we can see this direct relationship in loneliness and depression is of note, as it costs our GDP $32.3 billion in GDP annually, which is staggering. So yeah, I think if we do allow for intergenerational living to occur more frequently in Metchosin, we will uphold the values generation after generation and really protect the community that we all love so much. I'd like to speak to the BC Housing Branch. So 2003, the government of BC put forward a survey, and it says that approximately half of local governments in BC do not have permissive land use policies for secondary suites. And this, it's complex stuff. Maybe we don't know how to meet the numerous objectives of our community. For instance, in Metchosin, protecting ruralness or the sort of density with our neighbors. But suites and secondary dwellings provide a low impact densification while maintaining community character and enabling families from diverse economic backgrounds to live in the same area. They also help expand low-cost rental housing without the use of government subsidies. So really, despite these challenges, we've seen many communities in BC have enacted this, Nelson being one example of this. And they take a practical approach, acknowledging the need for affordable housing to protect their community members. Very simple, very basic, but that's what they've said. And I do see that we're different communities, but there is some sort of overlap there between us and Nelson. So this, I would like to bring forward, this is something that was produced by the BC government, and it speaks specifically to secondary suites, and it's a guide for local government on how to bring this forward. It's a handbook, it's a starting point. And like I said, I don't have all the answers here. This is very theoretical. This is a much broader topic, and I know there will be a lot of discussion around this, but this is a starting point. It has statistics on the communities that have pushed it through. It has results. It has public input involved as well. And I was really happy to find this, and I would urge our council to take note of it. Again, some additional points. We allow individuals to buy multiple properties in Metchosin and then Airbnb them. But we have stringent restrictions that often prevent individuals to build a small secondary suite or dwelling on their family's land. And I think this is quite controversial and must be addressed. And then the other point, there's so many illegal suites in Metchosin. It's just how it is. And I don't want to build another shop and call it that. I would like to do it properly and really be progressive within our community. So let's adequately address this issue in our changing community climate. And I think this is an important point. By increasing density on properties that already exist, we actually reduce destruction of rural areas. We actually uphold our environment by doing so. And it prevents urban sprawl into undeveloped areas. And I really think secondary suites would protect Metchosin's value of ruralness as this climate changes. And then finally, current building codes prevent families from building secondary suites on our properties. Less than 2 acres can force people to move away who have lived here their entire lives, and I believe will erode our sense of community. So again, this is a broader question, but I would like to ask you this. What do you want the future of Metchosin to look like? Generation will pass on to the next, and I'm speaking for my generation, a younger one for sure, but I want not the picture on the left to be what our community looks like in 20 years from now. I want places like Bilston Creek and the friendly neighbor attitude that I've grown up with here to flourish. And I really think that protecting the people who are up and coming with my age group will allow for that to flourish. So summarizing, by allowing secondary suites to exist more prominently, we'll actually protect our community and aid in the housing crisis. It will reduce development, increase density, and protect our rural and natural environment. It will foster intergenerational living that benefits families and our community as a whole. We have a handbook that we can use to guide our decisions, and really it will prevent the upcoming generation from being displaced from this place that we do call home. Finally, I'm asking for us to come up with a strategy as a community to incorporate a way for families to build those secondary dwellings or suites on properties less than 2 acres. Yeah, and I know this slide, I don't know how much we need to get into it. I know there will be questions, but as I stated before, this is a very big topic, and I just wanted to bring it forward to the community and council and put it all on your attention. So thank you for your time.
Great. Owen, thank you very much. And just what you said about what do you want Metchosin to look like is a question we always seem to be asking. I was at a meeting 2 weeks ago and it was front and center. So,
yeah.
Committee, are there any questions for Owen? While they may be thinking of questions, I just want to say I absolutely sympathize with the desire for housing and the incredible constraints that are with the younger generation right now. I've got a son, maybe your age, who again is struggling with housing as well. The one interesting thing is it's all over. It's all over the world, it seems. Again, we probably all know people in Toronto, Calgary, Edmonton are struggling with this as well. But yeah, there's a local flavor to that,
yeah,
to the big issue. So, Owen, thank you. You brought us, again, another element of this eternal question of what we want Metchosin to look like. And if there are no questions from council, sorry, go ahead, Councillor.
Well, I mean, obviously in Metchosin, on properties of 2 acres or more, we do allow secondary suites.
Yep.
So I'm just wondering how big is the property you're referring to? Because we don't have that many properties of that size in Metchosin.
Of less than 2 acres?
Yeah.
The property I'm referring to is about 1.2 acres in size. Yeah.
Okay, but thanks.
Yeah.
Marilyn.
Thank you, Owen. Thanks for bringing this to our attention. So we have in the past council received also a request from a group of people looking at tiny houses. As I said at that time, and as you pointed out tonight, this is a good starting point. I think council is struggling with a strategic, we're right now involved in our strategic plan, looking at just the questions that you're asking. What do we want Metchosin to be like in 10, 15, 20 years? And we'll certainly take this into consideration. I think it is worth pointing out to people that Metchosin has been quite progressive, and it doesn't sound like a Metchosin thing, but Metchosin did amend its Bylaw 259 in 2012 to allow detached secondary suites within parameters, and so we do allow either an attached or a detached secondary suite on land that is more than 2 acres, of course. So Metchosin has been quite progressive early on, and particularly in 2012. I know that's not what you're asking for, but I think that's important to point out. But thanks. This is very good information for us to keep and as a starting point. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Councillor Gray.
I don't have a question, Owen, but just a comment to say thanks also for bringing to light the issues around short-term vacation rentals. I think we're kind of in an odd place with that, and that's something that we can take a look at. But I appreciate this, and it's, others are saying, start of a conversation.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you so much. Awesome.
Councillor.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Very good presentation, thank you. A lot of the topics we've mulled over through the years. Back in the late 80s, we had an opportunity for people who had acreage, I think it was around 2 acres, where you were allowed to subdivide off for a family member. And that has gone by the wayside because after 5 years, which was one of the restrictions, people would sell those. I live in a neighborhood that has a number of those. So there was an effort to do that then, as well as time went on, we revisited that with the secondary attached, detached, depending on the size of your property. So there still is the ability to attach a dwelling, and can be tastefully done with properties under 2 acres. Yes, we are faced with a lot of the illegal dwellings that you're discussing and or had mentioned to us. We're still, that's being brought to our attention. I know going door to door on my campaign was, how am I going to keep Machosen rural? And densification was not one of the ways. In order for us to qualify to be in a rural designation with the RGS, which is Regional Growth Strategy, we have zonings in place, and so that's why we have things like detached and attached dwellings with certain kinds of zoning. So the points that you brought up in the presentation, some of them are not things that we probably have right now in our land use bylaw, but certainly things that we'll consider and things that we have done so far in histories. Clearly there's options in the future to explore more.
Awesome.
So thank you.
Yeah, thank you all. Appreciate it.
No further questions? Great. Okay, thanks very much, Owen. Okay, next we will move on to public.
You want to ask if anybody else has?
Yeah,
sorry.
okay. Yeah, next we'll move on to public participation. So public participation for the community planning meeting.
Okay, go for it.
Mr. Cole.
Thank you. Mayor, Council, Thomas Cole, Hibbert Lane. I live on the mountain. I would like to put forward a couple of things on this planning committee that you're making up. One, you've got over 100 acres of land up there. 2, it's full of wildlife. There's a cougar family in there. There's a bear family in there. I've walked through there many times. 2, if you try to create a green space in there and you put trails in there, you're going to have the same problem they have in Mill Hill, Weir's Beach. You're going to have parking problems up there, and you're going to have more people coming out because there's nowhere in Victoria for people to run their dogs, their animals, go for a walk, ride on their bikes or anything else. So if you try to create parks and trails in there, you're going to create a nuisance, you're going to create a parking problem, and you're creating an enforcement problem. So from one of the persons that lives on that hill, I would really appreciate it when you really think about it, leave it the way it is, natural, and leave it alone. That's all I got to say. And I do have to take my leave. I have a Zoom meeting at 8:30, Sport Fish Advisory Board. So thank you very much.
Sorry, Mr. Cole, and this is for everyone. Could you give us your street number or address, just for the record?
Hibbert.
There's a cougar family in there right now.
Okay. Did I miss that?
Mr. Cole,
Yeah.
you're at Hibbert Lane?
Hey,
Are you at Hibbert Lane? Did you
I'm
say?
on Hibbert Lane, yeah.
Okay, great. I may have missed that. Okay.
Right up from where Bonnie and Bart.
Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. What's happening?
Thank you.
I think it's a shock to see me here today with us. Obviously, everybody remembers my presentation. I think everybody was here. So obviously, I really support what Owen is saying. I just kind of want to remind everybody, like, this is a super privileged.
Sarah.
No, sorry, 4290 Machosen Road. Sorry.
And your name.
And Sarah Anthony, yeah. I just assume everybody knows who I am because I'm so famous now. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, so I lost my train of thought now.
Your presentation.
Yeah. So I think like one of the big things that I really want to get across, I think, with that, or I think, you know, obviously I'm not the only one who feels this way, is that Metchosin is at a great risk of becoming what my partner likes to call Oak Bay with sheep. You know, that second picture there, that is just rich people. Because, like, you know, a lot of people who moved here were able to move here when it was cheaper and could start their families and buy and live here. Not people in the same demographic can't do that anymore. It's almost impossible. So the only people who can afford to come out here are wealthy people. And they are not going to farm. They are not gonna, you know, they probably do care about the environment to an extent, but they're just here to have their big yards and their big houses. If you want this to be a farming community, which so many people say they want to do, but they don't really back up by supporting farmers. You know, we had, when Eric was running, when you were all running, there was that farmers meeting, and of course, you know, big things were kill all the rabbits, please, and housing for workers. So, you know, obviously you're talking more about family, but to be farmers out here, we need to be able to live. Nobody wants to have apartment buildings or anything like that. We want it to be rural, or we can't be farmers either. But there is a balance there of being able to have spaces to have people. Like, it's just becoming harder and harder to live out here. And I heard from so many people when I was working on that presentation who, you know, are people who want their kids not to have to move to Alberta, or people who have parents who are, they're going to have to move somewhere else because they can't afford to live. They want to keep them here, and that is family. And I think that is such an important rural value that I would think would be higher up on the list of things, but people seem to get distracted by this idea that it's going to turn it not rural. I think that is rural. I mean, when people came out here in the 1800s, that was so they could live there with their family and their workers and everything. Like, that's what farmers do. Like, that's just how it is. So obviously I really, really support the idea of doing something. It doesn't have to be tiny homes. I don't know. Just giving people a way to help their family, to help their community, to keep, you know, Stephanie's workers here, to keep nurses and people like who just want a little place to live. We can't, as Metchosin, obviously save the housing crisis. Like, that's ridiculous. I've never said that. But we, you know, people do want to be able to help those close to us. And I think that is a very reasonable thing. And I will just add one more thing. I do also want to support the V8 show, because we live down the road, and it is great for us, for our farm stand, when we have events like that. And yeah, the cars go down, but if it happens now and then, we do not mind, because it is a huge boon to our business. So thank you, guys.
Thank you, Sam. Anyone else for public participation? So Eric and then Katie.
Hi guys, Eric White, 4290 Metchosin Road. Intergenerational living won't be able to carry on without some kind of change or flexibility from our community. And I think our children, our intergenerational children of Metchosin, are worthy of being allowed to live out here.
Thanks, Eric. Katie. Oh, Bob, I'm gonna let Katie go first.
sorry.
No. Katie, no, you gotta recognize that chair. And you gotta say your name and address.
Katie Nelson, 4596 William Head Road. I have some probably really stupid questions to ask, but I think, like, on the one hand, of course I want families to be able to be together, and of course when you're older, to be able to have your family want to be there and take care of you, that's very important. But I would like to know what the legal definitions of a family member are, how inclusive or exclusive that is. I would also like to know in terms of, okay, you took care of your parents and now they died, and your son doesn't want to live here, and you're thinking, well, so how long before you can sell your property if you decide that's not, I mean, none of my family members want to move here, so, when I die, I'll be doing something else with the property. Besides rotting.
Thank you, Katie. And Bob, go ahead. Yes.
No, not mine, somebody's.
Thank you.
Say your name.
Yes, I will say my name. I do remember it. I'm Bob Burgess, 3837 Juke Road. And I beg your consideration here. I'm slightly off topic. I need to address a misstatement made by Councillor Shelley at the past special budget meeting. And the reason I'm bringing it up is it's come back to me on more than one occasion. Somehow you inferred that the Pioneer Museum doesn't pay for the hydro, that we haven't got a hydro bill due to the solar panels. Well, actually the Children's Museum pays a significant amount to maintain the power for the school museum, the Pioneer Museum. We also supply power to the farmers market and of course occasionally to the equestrians. So the question is, why do we heat the building year round? That's where the energy is going. Well, many of the artifacts, especially those that are paper or fabric, are sensitive to temperature and humidity and will deteriorate. Now, when we did the restoration, we did our best to insulate both the buildings to the maximum possibility for those structures and to minimize the heat loss and try and control the humidity. There's a limit to what you can do with 2x4 structures. Yeah, that's it. The schoolhouse is more difficult to maintain a constant temperature due to the 12-foot high ceilings. It's nice and toasty up there, but down here on the floor it's not. No, it's not so much. It's pretty cool. We deeply appreciate the efforts of the past council to assist our society with the purchase of those 16 solar panels that you referred to. And we really appreciate that. And that really did help. But as in the case of everything else that our society has done, all the labor was done by volunteers. In this case, Rick Perrone and Peter Pardell. They certified electricians. They provided all the connections, did all the work, and there was no charge to us. Or to the municipality. Now, last year's hydro bill for the Pioneer Museum was just under $1,600, and that's with the input of the solar panels. The schoolhouse was unheated because I was working on it, and it only turned the power on when we needed to plug tools in and make them work. So we haven't had a full year of this schoolhouse running yet, so can't we say exactly what it looks going to look like. But to the point, today the Pioneer Museum's consumption is consistent with the past year. However, for the same period, there's just under 2,000 square feet in that building, the 2 stories. The schoolhouse itself is 600 square feet, 20 by 30, but with the 12-foot high ceilings, remember. To the point that we got the last bill we got from October the 5th to December the 2nd was $172 for the museum. The school was $373. So we're running about 3 times the rate. We're consuming about 3 times as much power to keep that building, keep the artifacts under control. That's working out. So our power bill is going to be about, I'm estimating now, between $2,000 and $2,500 for this year, on top of the $1,500. So we actually are spending probably close to $4,000 to heat those buildings.
Bob, I'm going to ask you to wrap up.
I'm going to wrap up. The reason I brought this up was that I was approached by a private citizen while I was walking around out here, and he started talking to me about the solar panels, and he had the idea from the conversation last week that we were freeloading, that we weren't paying for any power. It was all being handled by either the solar panels or the district. And I was trying to explain that. So I was just wanted to emphasize that as a private citizen, we can have opinions, but off-the-cuff remarks can sometimes have a different impact, and that was what's happened here. So I just wanted to get it on record that we're not freeloading, we are paying our power, and that's about the best I can do for you. All our operating funds come from the old barn books, And for $4,000, that's a hell of a lot of books we gotta sell at $1 a piece and store it and do all that.
Thanks.
So, thank you for your indulgence.
Okay, thanks, Bob. Councillor Donaldson,
Can I
did you?
just comment?
Yeah, absolutely.
So the reason I actually had mentioned the solar panel was to your credit. Because I do realize how much effort went into refurbishing the building and insulating it, and I know what the building's made of because it was an old barn. And the fact that those solar panels, which are specific to that building and not the school museum, which is not what I referred to, that you actually were far more successful with having solar panels. My example was more that I would like to see that on our other buildings. That's what I was using as an example, not to say you were freeload at all, that it was a great investment for you guys to have done that. That's,
Okay,
so I apologize if it was misinterpreted.
I guess it was.
I'll actually have to go back and listen to the video.
Yeah.
Okay.
My apologies.
Okay. Well, no one, thanks for the information, Bob. Yeah. Is there anyone else for public participation?
Thank you. Gary Smurfett, 3950 Gilbert Drive. I'm going to be speaking to what Owen had to say here earlier, what Mr. Enright had to say. Land everywhere is expensive. Okay? We know that's a reality, whether you're buying here or in Cornell, prices are skyrocketing. He referred to Nelson's situation where they're going to density. Nelson isn't on-site sewage like we have, okay? And in our community, we have a lot of on-site sewage. We also have a lot of wells. All of that comes into play when you're dealing with the densities. When you're considering allowing a second dwelling on a lot, less than 2 acres, but it's restricted to only family members, as Katie said earlier, what happens when they go to sell it? I've seen that happen with the old, I believe it's called 946 subdivisions for family members. It's really not something that can be enforced at any level. In 2021, the now retired building inspector said to me when he was looking at an illegal dwelling, he said, "Don't get excited, Gary, there's only 500 of them in Machosen that he's aware of." Past councils deal with this for years, and this council is going to have to deal with it. People living in buildings that are not built with a building permit according to code. People living in RVs. I mean, in my neighborhood, 2 of them parked within the last 4 months on a road that everybody drives by. I imagine elected officials have driven by it. I imagine staff have driven by it. But they're just sitting there with people living in them, and the house also has a suite. I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm just saying that, you know, this place is, and I've been here 35 years, and I have someone who's born here, who's 62 years old, tell me he's getting fed up with the Chosen because it's just going downhill. So I think if you're considering changes, I mean, the first change in density land use, the first change might be decide what you want Machosen to be. And I think that's a good question. What do you want it to be? Maybe we'll end up being a bit like Langford was 20 years ago, considered, you know, a dog patch place if we don't start enforcing some of these bylaws. Thank you very much.
Thanks, sir. Michelle.
Michelle Jones, 5290 William Head Road, and I also would like to address the question of tiny homes, secondary suites, and in some ways this previous speaker already addressed some of the problems that I have with it. There are a limited number of septic tanks that can be put on a piece of land. Many people in Machosen still have septic tanks. In our neighborhood, we have people on the aquifer, and they're on septic as well. We have running water, but city water, but a lot of people, it's a real pressure on the land to put in additional infrastructure to accommodate more people. Densification, I was a renter most of my life. I sympathize with the problem finding housing, let alone inexpensive housing. But densification affects everybody. It's not just one family who needs to put an extra building on their land to have an intergenerational arrangement. We're 87 people above the 5,000 mark. Who's going to pay the $1 million in policing for 87 people? We don't have the commercial base in Metchosin that other municipalities have. And the commercial base is what basically carries the vast amount of development taxation, that kind of thing. That's how they pay for municipal expenditures, is through commercial property. So if we're talking about densifying the population, in order to cover the services like fire, police, putting in sewers, we're going to have to commercialize. There's no other way around it. And we already have a fight going on Silk Road with the industrial site. We don't have our roads are at capacity. We're used as a byway for Souk, Colwood, Langford, and people from Up Island. And at some point, I guess what I want to ask the council to do is, municipalities seem to have, the method seems to be from the, let's solve the immediate problem, and then we'll figure out the other problems later. And what I'm asking this council to do is start at the top on what Metchosin needs for the next 20 years, and decide what those things are, and then figure out how to fund them without pushing the cost of services over the top. And I think there's a way to do that. Thank you.
Thanks, Michelle. Mr. Donaldson?
Thank you. Good evening, Brent Donaldson, Charles Court. Just two quick points. Regarding secondary suites, is my understanding that every zone in Metchosin you can have a secondary suite. The threshold is anything under 2 acres has to be attached, so nobody's holding anybody back. And certainly I understand we have kids too, and they're paying exorbitant rents. So I do understand that, but just a point of clarification, secondary suites are allowed in every zone. Secondly, I support the car show, but I do have some concerns about parking. I was a trails coordinator for about 3 or 4 years, and I was on the Parks and Trails, and I know some of the issues we had was just down in front of Rimmer's house. There's a paved area, not paved, a gravel area there, and on Metchosin Day and certainly Apple Festival and garage sale, the main thoroughfare of Metchosin on Happy Valley Road is jammed, and there's no room for people to walk. So a lot of people are going to be walking down the road to go to the site, and I think safety is huge, and certainly I want to see this go ahead, but certainly Happy Valley Road is like a funnel. Mr. Carline isn't here, he's our cricket guy, but certainly that big field back there, I know they don't like vehicles on it, but certainly maybe we could park vehicles around the edge of it. You know, it's in the summertime, the ground's going to be hard, so, and most people's vehicles now don't leak oil or anything like that. So if we could utilize part of the backfield, I'm sure that would be a bit of a safety for our residents and people attending, but I'm certainly supportive of the car show. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Brian. And going once, twice, 3 times. Thanks. I'm going to call close to public participation. Thank you very much, everyone. And next on the agenda is the adoption of minutes, the community planning meeting of January 16th. And
move adoption.
Oh, Councillor Gordon.
Okay. I just had an amendment to suggest once we get there.
Okay, Mayor Little, you've made a motion to adopt the minutes, January 16th?
Sorry, I didn't hear you say that again.
Once the motion is made to adopt the minutes, I have a correction, an amendment to make.
Move adoption.
Okay, and seconded by Councillor Donaldson, and discussion. Councillor Gray.
Yeah, I have an amendment to suggest on page 5 of the agenda package. down near the bottom. It reads, committee discussed. I guess it's the third bullet. It says, we discussed clarity on who maintains ownership of stormwater works after the land begins to be sold. So I would like to see us delete the words after the land begins to be sold. Or I move that amendment. I'm not sure that was said at the meeting.
Yeah, I was the one who raised this issue. And the reason I raised it is because title is with the developers until the lots begin to be sold. And after that, all of the title of the land moves to the individual owners. So to me, it's unclear as to who actually owns the stormwater works when all of the area is sold. So that was actually deliberate.
Maybe there could be a clarification that it's not the buffer land that's being sold. It reads to me that after the buffer land is sold, and that doesn't ride well with me.
Okay, no, great point, so if we could amend, sorry, after the residential lots of Central Mountain Estates are sold.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, that's a good point of clarification. All good, Tina? Okay, thank you. And with that, any other comments on these minutes? And with that, I'll call the question. All in favor of adopting? Thank you. Passed. Okay. And we next move into the receipt of the minutes from the Parks and Trails Advisory Committee of January 17th.
Move receipt.
Very little moves receipts. Councillor F, second. Any discussion? During no discussion, I will, Councillor Donaldson.
I thought I saw somewhere there was a budget. Oh, yes. Okay. I have a question.
Yes.
On page 10, 10D, there's recommendation for the different budgets that Parks, the PTAS has.
Correct.
Major capital is $55,000 for the Weir's Beach Trail reconstruction. Minor capital $10,000 for projects that may forward during the year, and maintenance $15,000. So in the past, the maintenance has been $3,000.
Okay.
So in the budget last week, I looked and it's like, it's tripled. So I question that.
Okay. That's those crazy Parks and Trails guys. They
Well, I'd like to know.
Yeah, and this was classic thing. There is ambition of the Parks and Trails Committee to do significant work.
Okay.
It is up to council's discretion and the Finance Committee to address that. So point taken, and we can look at it further. So
they will be meeting with us soon. I suspect we'll have further discussion on it then.
Absolutely.
Okay. Thank you.
And that is Tuesday next. So. Okay. Councillor, anything? Okay. Hearing no further comments, call the question on receiving these minutes. Mm-hmm. All in favor? And opposed? None. Thank you. This passes. Okay. Okay. Okay, so we're on business arising now, and we'll get to the amendment, the agenda amendment of Councillor Gray. So the land sale to the CRD. Councillor Gray, please.
Thanks, Councillor Shukin. I would just wanted to ask, again on page 5 of the agenda package, under the Councillor's update, is the notion the committee discussed in the middle of the page, and the last bullet says, sale agreement negotiations with CRD have ended, document confirming. And I just wondered if we might share that document with council so we could see that.
I'm sorry, help me one more time. Where are we?
Page 5 of the agenda package.
Page 5 of the agenda package.
Middle of the page.
Okay, thank you. Thanks.
And the bullet says sale agreement negotiations with CRD have ended, document confirming. And this has been a topic of concern of mine for a while. There is a document that says that we'll do a bunch of discussion with the community and get back to the CRD about the sale, and I'm eager that we finish that with the document. But I gather there is something available for us to look at, and if we could just share that with the committee, that would be great. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, the document I'm referring to comes from, I believe it's January 31st of 2022. It was sent by, I believe it was Tammy Van Sweden. I will pass it to everybody.
Okay.
Yes, okay. I believe the language is quite decisive in terms of saying that the land sale had ended. So, okay, but thank you.
Perfect, thanks so much.
Okay. Okay, so we're next on the councilor's update, and there's a few matters here that I would like council's input and some action from them, I suppose, from yourselves. So the first item is the Bufferland Working Group Terms of Reference. So I'm going to just, so in terms of history here and need, I think the rationale for a committee to carefully consider the future of the bufferland, it's well documented from the information provided before, and I think well understood too. So, as we know, protection of green space bufferland was part of the 2017 referendum that passed, allowing for the land swap between the Machodas and Langford and the Channel Nation. The proposed sale of the bufferland came in October 2021, and it came without any public engagement. The council of the day decided not to proceed with that sale, and there followed discussion about a public engagement process in the months that followed. Some steps were taken, such as the matter being referred to MEASC and PTASC, and then there was a survey that was distributed in August of last year, but there was not a robust and coordinated public engagement process. So that's what's proposed here in terms of the terms of reference. So just really briefly, the purpose is to identify and evaluate options for the future management of the bufferland and bring these back to council for their consideration. At least 2 information meetings will be held to get feedback from the community. We will evaluate options in a fair and objective manner, and the criteria are listed in the terms of reference. The committee can come up with its own criteria as well, or the working group can anyways. The aim is to report back to council within 6 months of the the working group being formed, and then there's a composition. So Councillor Donaldson and myself, area residents, a member of PTAS and or MEASC, and then community members as well. And so up to 9 members are asked to be part of this. So with that, I was hoping for your input for any modifications, but that the committee moves the terms of reference to council for approval, but at the same time that we also begin to post notices, pending any comments you have, to begin to solicit for members for the committee. So, your thoughts, Councillor?
Well, I know that that working groups can be extremely valuable. I mean, the Dogs and the Chosen Working Group brought forward a lot of things that about dogs have been a big issue for a while. One thing about this one is I'm not entirely sure I agree with having a working group on the bufferland. I feel that in the last term, I don't think that there was anything that even came close to the topic of the bufferland during our meetings in the last several years. I feel we've had extensive input from the public. We've had letters, we've had emails, we've had people speaking at meetings, we've had a petition, we've had a survey, and it seems like to me that rather than dragging it out any further, that it would just be a really good idea to get on with it and just figure out a decision. I think, I can't see that going back and going over it again is really going to bring any more, input or any new points that we haven't already had, really discussed a lot. I think one thing we need to get a legal opinion on the covenant for the stormwater retention ponds. We really don't know. We haven't actually seen a document that's even been signed. So, we need to know if that is legally binding, and if it's so, what kind of power does Machosen have as far as a say over those stormwater ponds? I noticed in the covenant, there's very little mentioned about the environment, about the habitat or removal of trees or anything along that line. Once that's known, I think council needs to have staff and council go back through all the information that we've had over the last years, actually, from the public, and come up with, a short list of options that we can make decisions on, and then once we have those options, then we have a public information gathering, and then we make a decision. And I think that, I think that land needs to be protected, and I think that dragging it on for many more months is, really not that necessary. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Ray. Any other thoughts? Go ahead, Mary.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I appreciate your comments. The problem that I see is we've promised to have a comprehensive, fulsome public engagement. And although we have received letters on both sides, and we have received information from the Mitchell's Environmental Select Committee as well as the Parks and Trails, there was a survey as well, which wasn't well taken up. And the survey wasn't addressing specifically the buffer lands and the Neeld Road and the Happy Valley residents. And so I think it would be worth our effort actually to go through a comprehensive public engagement piece, because we promised to do that. We still don't know what we're going to do with it. And in my opinion, just leaving it as is without doing anything would be negligent on our part, because that's not really practical. And so once we get the information regarding the stormwater water retention, once we get the legal opinion regarding the covenant, we'll be in good shape to get really community input on this. And I'm not afraid of the public engagement, not saying that you are, but I think it'll be good. I think it'll be good for the community. It'll bring the community together. And what I found is that when you give people the opportunities to speak, even if they don't agree with you in the end, at least they've had a chance to be heard. And I think that's what has been missing, and I'd really like to see this. And I like the terms of reference. The only question that I had was, I didn't realize that you had installed in here, I missed it, the 6-month timeline, so it definitely needs to have a timeline, and also a point that the working group would be responsible for their own minutes to be submitted in a timely fashion to staff. Thank you.
Great. Thanks, Arlene. I have a quick comment. And Councillor App, your points are well taken, and again, the thing we keep hearing about the buffer land is leave them be and let them be natural and let the animals come through. But the question to my mind is one major thing is chances of the buffer land are not going to remain the same. There's this massive beast of a residential development relative to that area that's going to be built in the next few years. Not to mention all the industrial, the commercial side as well. So that is bound to change the buffer land. And the question in terms of keeping it in a natural state, to me the question is how do we do that, given the number of people who will have their dogs and an interest in getting out of what is going to be a very dense housing development as we've seen. So to me, my ultimate goal would be to leave it as natural as possible. The question is how to do it. So that I think is a question that is going, and I think the Neeld Road folks really, in that broader area, really need to have a say in that. And again, we go back to the 2017 referendum where the full community voted, and it's those individuals in that area who are facing the impacts of what was a community vote. So I think we have an obligation to hear from them. So that's the thinking that goes into the terms of reference. So any other thought? I guess what I am asking is for that the committee move the terms of reference to council for final approval. Councillor Donaldson. Okay.
I'd like to make a motion that the committee move the terms of reference to council for final approval, pending support of this committee, which I guess we'll vote on. That a notice be posted on the district's website advising of the working group and seeking members for the initiative. The working group and membership is subject by approval of council.
Second that.
Okay, the motion, there's a two-part motion that is put forward by Councillor Donaldson and seconded by Mayor Little. And discussion on the motion. And Councillor Craig.
Yeah, I'm going to speak in opposition to the motion. I really appreciate all the work that's gone into this, obviously, and I'm kind of excited that we would proceed with the having some public input, further public input on the buffer land. But now that we've got the terms of reference, I realize that, oh gosh, much of the work to be done here is work that the council should be doing itself. We were elected to do the kind of things here that I read about. Hearing from community members, getting the ideas together, their insights, holding 2 information meetings so that we can make some decisions. And I guess I feel like we're setting it up in a way that there's a working group that would filter all of that rather than us taking it on. So that's where I'm sort of stuck, is that I think this is actually our job to do the public engagement, not necessarily hand it off to other people. And I'm struck by the difficulty of selecting people and the criteria that those are, having to have in-camera meetings to do all of that, whereas we were already vetted, and we're here now. So that'll be my first comment, and I don't know if you want to talk about the role of council versus the role of the working group, but I have a few other comments about the actual details to add.
Go ahead, Councillor Johnson.
Yes, the working group is similar to an advisory group, and it reports back to council. It actually doesn't replace council. And there were 2 councillors that were actually appointed as liaisons. And yeah, so I don't see an issue with this at all. I think this is actually, having been on a working group and how instrumental that experience was, and the amount of brainstorming that the community that came together to do that did. And it does go back to council until council is satisfied with the work. I mean, sometimes that had to go back to the working group that I was on before we got the appropriate interpretations and the application of what the end goal was. So there's a great asset of having working groups. It also doesn't take up a lot of staff time in then having to prepare minutes and take our agendas, that sort of thing. So it's a great alternative to having a advisory group, mostly because it is a very short term. There's an end game, 6 months or less in some cases.
Great, thank you, Councillor Johnson. Marilyn?
Yeah, I concur with that. So that the most recent example is the Dogs and Matildas working group, and what the benefit of having a working group working on it is they have specific knowledge, and they have skin in the game, and they are not to replace council, they're to advise council. And working groups are great because they usually have a time frame, a terms of reference, and then that is brought to the committee and then to council for their actions. The council, of course, doesn't have to take their advice, but that's what they're structured to do, and it has worked marvelously well in the past.
Great. Sorry, Councillor Gray, and I would echo that too. I feel like just the limited experience I've had as a council member, there's so much coming at you, and to find the time to focus on a specific issue is pretty rare. So again, that's the purpose of the working group. And yeah, Councillor Craig.
Thanks, Councillor Shukin. I guess I'm thinking this is a 6-month project, so it's not actually happening very quickly, and council's would have 6 months to work on this through the planning committee. So I don't see that quite being the same. The other thing is, I don't know about the dog working group if it had public consultations, but this is more of a public consultation exercise. I'm just eager to get to meet people, to learn from them, to hear what their issues are. As Councillor Epp explained, there's lots there, but lots that we've already received, but if we're going to engage more. I think the 2 community engagement sessions make good sense. I'm not speaking against community involvement. I'm just talking about the makeup of the working group, whether it's a working group, whether it's us, and I think we could probably do as well and also learn a lot in the process. There are a couple of other points there which I could go to if you like, Councillor Schuler, just in terms of direction. So we all know that presently our staff are under-resourced and stretched without the addition of more work and responsibilities. And there's a point here in the I think I'd just like to see a change. The terms of reference say that the working group will go and ask staff for, about various different questions, including finances, land use, and legal questions. And I'm not keen on that. I don't think the working group should have that kind of access to staff. I think there's 2 councillors, going to be on the committee, and it would be their responsibility to do that rather than the working group. And that it narrows things a little bit, but it also means some protection for our staff who are overworked at the moment.
Great.
Also, of course, asking for legal advice, that's kind of a costly thing, and it really does need to be controlled. It's done through the CAO, of course, so the group may find that they have legal questions that aren't going to be answered particularly.
Sorry, Councillor. Yeah, the intention would be that any questions to staff are vetted through the chair and the co-chair as well. And of course, yeah, I'm becoming increasingly aware of like the taxes, how much we're putting on staff. So I will, I will amend that bullet to make it more clear that any questions do come through the chair and the co-chair.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Councillor.
Yeah, I won't vote in opposition to having the working group, but I would just hope that at the end of 6 months' time that the working group can actually come up with some ideas or suggestions that we haven't, or information that we haven't already been through.
You may vote. Thank you. Good comment. Thanks. Okay.
Just one more point then. I think there's some advantage if there's going to be a working group set up like this, that two things be made clear. One is at the top of the second page, it says, this are the criteria, but not limited to. That opens this up to a much bigger question. Maybe these are actually the topics, or if there are other topics that should be in the list, we should put them there now. And then finally, my comment would be all of the advisory committees are told in their terms of reference that council appreciates the valuable expertise, I'm reading this here, valuable expertise and specialized input. However, committee recommendations are considered by council and issues may or need to be considered in a wider context. Council therefore reserves the right to vary or not endorse recommendations from advisory committees. I'm quite concerned we're going to set up a group of community members to be deeply involved in this and feel really strongly about it, and then we may at council turn around, each of us together, voting separately, but then turn them down in their the grandest proposal. And that would be an unfortunate sort of result. But everyone has to realize that's the name of the game. It's council who will make the decisions, not the working group.
Absolutely, yeah. Okay, and I'm familiar with the statement you've just read out. I think it's worth adding to the bottom. Yeah. Okay. And any further comments? Okay, hearing none. Sorry, go ahead.
Just say, the advisory committees, they are committed to no conflict of interest and also confidentiality. They don't know. I'm not certain this is an appropriate vein for that, but you have mentioned the idea of fair and objective, and so I'm not sure how we get fair and objective, except I'll look forward to the committee working in that way, but it's just people need to realize it's not like a select advisory committee where there are restrictions on their membership.
Okay. Great. Councillor Jones.
And with that, the appointment to Councillor Sir would certainly be guiding that process, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Okay. I will call the question. Those in favor of the motion? And opposed? Thank you. Great. Okay. I will move on to the next issue or matter here. Very simple one. When was it? It was January 16th, I think, that we, at this committee meeting, talked about the Section 219 covenant on regarding the detention pond and the ability of the developers or the people who own the land that will be where the Centre Mountain Estates is going to build one or more detention ponds on the buffer land. And at that point, there were a number of questions that were raised. I have formulated those questions, and particularly that fundamental one is as to whether this is a legitimate covenant and does have basically force of law on the chosen. That has been sent to the CAO and to legal counsel, and also to our engineer as well. There was a number of technical questions that I was asking as well. So, great. Go ahead.
And I might just say, Councillor Shugan, we talked on the weekend about this. I just feel the urgency of this particular question sort of outpaces a lot of other activities around the buffer lands. We need to sort this out, and if there's any help that any of us can provide in terms of getting a look at things or doing anything, I'd be pleased to help. I went up there on Friday to look, and it looks like on the residential area that there's more work being done. The actual drainage pond that's there right now looks like it's being fixed up a little bit. I'm not certain anymore whether or not the monitoring station actually is well placed to capture the water coming off Center Mountain Estates, which makes me think, gosh, we may need another monitoring station. That would take a different expert than myself, but it's, a 5-minute walk or something in a different direction. I see water coming off Center Mountain Estates heading more towards, I know residents there can shower and Heather Shower's place, or down towards the Boover's place. It's not heading back up the creek to where the monitoring station is. So I'm actually concerned about a lot of the issues up there. Sorting that out would be a real important question real soon. Thanks.
Great. And thanks, Councillor Gray. One of the, I believe it was a very astute move on the part of this committee to ask staff to draft a policy that any major stormworks within Machosen are first referred to MEASC and PTASC for their input. And so I talked to staff today, and they're hoping to get that policy to us ASAP. We recognize they're very busy. Your point about the monitoring station, I think, is a good one. And there was an observation made today about the potential placement of a possible stormwater pond. That seemed to be downstream from the monitoring station. And within the covenant, there is specific language about that, where it should be placed. So I meant to go back this afternoon, I just didn't get a chance. But yeah, thanks for flagging that.
Well, any help we can provide.
Great, thank you. Okay, moving on. Okay, I have a little twist to throw at you with the next one. The Weir Beach Trail Working Group Terms of Reference. I am going to ask that this one not be considered by the committee. And I ask that after getting some input today from staff about some of the mechanics of forming working groups, and first of all, the formality of it and the process, and also some of the administrative burden that comes with working groups. Now, what I would like to explore is going back to PTASC and doing a very simple thing of forming a subcommittee, and from there opening that subcommittee up to input from residents to provide their input into, again, identifying solutions not only in terms of the trail and the stairs, but some of the parking and the traffic issues that are occurring in that area as well. So I would make a request that the committee just hold off on this. And what we did at the January 16th meeting is refer this issue to PTASC, and we happened to meet the very next day. I would like to go back to PTASC and actually execute the direction that council did, which was to refer it back to PTASC. So, okay, so am I being confusing on my approach here? Councillor?
Well, I think it's a good idea. I mean, I agree with you about adding, as I mentioned earlier, about adding another working group to the mix. In this case, we had a fairly comprehensive engineering report in November regarding this, and we all know that there's no parking there and no real facility there to have any kind of a real public access. That the whole idea of the stairs were mostly for for Machosen local residents, and and for the ability to get off the beach if necessary. He gave us the two prices on fixing it up, and the one, of course, was the whole metal stairs, the prefab stairs for $50,000. The other one was just to replace, kind of fix up what's there. The top part was fine. The lower part is what needs to be fixed for about $15,000. And his statement was that if the main goal is to simply provide a safe access point for a relatively small amount of pedestrian traffic, then the secondary option is adequate. And I think that that kind of says all that we really need there. I sort of I kind of question spending so much time for PTASC on this. One thing that bothers me a bit about it is that last year we talked quite a lot about PTASC focusing on the roadside trail by Hans Helgeson. I think that could be a multi-year project that would go all the way from Lombard all the way to Taurus or Aquarius, whatever road comes off of there, that would not only provide safer access around the school, but would also be a great connector for quite a few of the trails in our Machosa Trails network, which seems to have kind of gone by the wayside in favor of the Weir's Beach stairs. So anyway, that's just thoughts I had reading that.
Okay, thanks, Councillor. Any other Councillor? Sorry, Councillor Gray.
Great, thanks, Councillor Shukin. I think it's a great idea to can a working group. I was just worried about a bureaucratic response, building more working groups. But we did ask PTAS for some information. I think they gave it to us. So, we asked, what about parking? And they said parking is a big concern. We asked about priority, and I think they put as number one priority, and they put a dollar figure to it. So my eyes are drawn back to the our engineer's report, which said, what's your idea here? What do you want to do? And it was, do you want to have a lot of visitors there? Or do you want to have not so many visitors? And from that, it seems to me we can get to a decision about this, and I'd be prepared to move a motion this evening. I think that we know well enough now that we probably don't, because of our parking situation, we don't really want to attract a lot of people there. So I would go to the lower cost question, or no stairs at all. It's that kind of vein of things. And then push it to finance, and it can go in the budget, and we'll figure out whether it gets through at the budget time or not. There'll be other things will be measured against.
There's no money.
We put it there, and then we find out if there's money. That's how it would go. So refer it to finance this evening. Anyway, the other questions about toilets, garbage, those ones they're the same as Blinkhorn and Taylor Beach. It's a much bigger question. I don't know if a group like Weir's Beach group should be answering that much bigger question that came up during the election for all of us, which is, what do? We want to welcome people here, but we don't necessarily want all of the other troubles. So I'm not sort of driven to putting that to a PTASK working group, but to PTASK as a question generally, how do we talk about this in all of our areas, wherever we have trails and parks?
Mayor Little.
Yeah, thank you for those comments. They're important and valuable. And what PTASK is a very different committee than some of our other advisories. They are boots on the ground.
Mm-hmm.
So they give advice, but they also do the work in maintaining. We don't have a parks department. We have the Parks and Trails chair. We have the Parks and Trails coordinator, and the members of the Parks and Trails committee who help to maintain the trails and develop new trails. And so I like your idea of rather than a working group which places a burden on the staff. The recommendation is to form a subcommittee of the PTASK who will take into considerations of the people. They know the William Head work crew that can help with the rebuilding. They have that relationship. They can coordinate it. So the subcommittee is not to decide on what we want to do. They're the committee that will move the project forward rather than having us contract that out to a contractor. They also know the landowner next door, who's a structural engineer as well, and he also has a device that he can help with that. And so the idea is handing this over, or suggesting that they form a subcommittee, and the subcommittee would be made up of, according to our structure, members of the PTASK, and they would get input from the landowners and others in the area. And I think we've heard loud and clear that it should be a trail for the local residents, not a destination spot for anybody going there with a car. And so I like the idea of the subcommittee rather than the working group.
Okay, thanks, Mayor Little. I'll just make a quick comment. So we had the council meeting on the Monday night, and then the next night was PTASK, so we had an opportunity to talk about it then. We also had the benefit of comments from 3 residents, including one of the neighbors. And to me, the biggest thing was not even so much access to the trail, it was the parking issue, but also the traffic management issue in that area. And the way the neighbors described it, it was almost like they were on the edge of their seats every weekend day waiting for a serious accident or an injury or a serious accident to occur. So to me, and then of course you get to the bottom of the beach, and the beach use is highly problematic, and then it goes down the beach as well. I don't want to go too far on this, but I think parking, traffic, and beach access go hand in glove. And it's easy to say, put up signs, put up no parking signs, of course, that won't be followed unless they're enforced. And so we have to talk about how we're going to enforce as well, if we have the capability to make it meaningful. So, okay, that just those are comments. Councillor Gray.
So I appreciate, Mayor Little, what you're saying is that this group might actually build the trail, but they might be asking us for money. So at some point, they'll maybe needs to go to finance to ask if we have the dollars. So I'd be happy to move that tonight if people want to proceed with the financial side of it, but if not, that's okay. And they can just begin to take a look at it. On the parking side, I guess I'm interested, like we heard about Hans Helgeson, we had a specialist come in and say, here's what you would do about the traffic in that situation. We're hoping to put in a crosswalk. This is another circumstance where probably it's a traffic question, not a park or trail question. Yeah. So it might actually be an issue of getting an expert in to help us with that. Finally, I'd say I don't mind what the Parks and Trails Committee do, but I don't feel I need to direct them to set up a subcommittee. They're fully capable to do that, and we can just, everyone hand it back to them. Let's give them some straight, good stuff we'd like to hear from them and go from there. Maybe they want to work on the budget a little bit. Maybe they want to sort of see what's possible with the help of the prison. Maybe the price can come down and we'll come back with a different number. That would be helpful.
Okay. Thanks, Councillor Graham. And I am on the committee, of course. And I intend to bring this back to them and be part of the discussion as well. So,
what do you want to ask them?
Okay. So again, there's no action here, and in terms of budget, I think that we will get there. And I recognize that it's maybe not an easy we'll get there, but So okay, moving on quickly here. Just very briefly, the Municipal Grounds Group, it used to be known as the Municipal Users Group. We had a very long and fruitful discussion about the name of the group, and there were some interesting ideas put out. Finally, I think there was just a general consensus. Councillor Donaldson, do you agree?
Yes.
General consensus. The Municipal Grounds Group.
Muggs was not the one with it.
Yeah, exactly. So we had 12 participants there, and it was an excellent discussion. And again, there was that question of what does Machosen want to be as we move into the future, and all of the representatives of these groups very much feel that because they receive visitors, they're looking for more space on the grounds, and have a lot of ambitions for this community to be what they believe it should be. The next meeting is Thursday, May 4th. And wrap up the councillor's update with the Bilston Watershed Habitat Protection Association. So this is a group that's been around for a long time. We know one of the founders who was an activist and very much involved in the community. She's still involved, the former president is still involved, but there are a number of people who have stepped forward to breathe new life into this organization. And what's interesting for me is I kind of sort of understood the nature of the group in a way. It's not the Bilston Creek watershed. It's not focused simply on Bilston Creek. It is the Bilston watershed, which is a much broader area, and of course encompasses issues like groundwater use and land management and all that. So the annual general meeting for the Habitat Protection Association is March 9th at 7 p.m. at the South Vancouver Ranger facility. And all are welcome, and membership is $10 or something like that. It's $5. And is that a lifetime membership? Okay. And there we go. I hope to see you on March 9th at 7 p.m. at SVI Rangers. So thank you. Okay, moving down the list. Correspondence. Okay, so the Early 48 Club requests to use school grounds for an event. Now, I'm prepared to approve this in principle, pending resolution of issues to be identified and addressed, and I believe that there should be some sort of report or proposal done. Any thoughts from the council on that? Mayor Little?
Yeah, what Mr. Summers indicated was that he's got a meeting tomorrow with his group. And so I think he would be happy if we would approve this in principle with some of the details to be worked out so that he could go to the board and ask them, do you want to have it this year? Because if they don't want to have it, we don't have to work out the issues. And so I think that's what Mr. Summers, I'm seeing him nod, that's what he would like to see. Either we're interested or not. And if we're interested, let's approve it in principle. We can work out some of the details when he comes back with comments from his group.
Okay. Okay, if I could, I would make a motion, and I wouldn't mind if somebody helped me clarify this though. I would move that we approve the car rally as sponsored by Early for the V8 Club, subject to addressing and or resolving any issues that staff may bring. Staff may bring through council, or staff and council may bring regarding this event. And so, for example, there's the motion, but I'll just give it some color. So, for example, if it happens to be raining heavily around that time, we may not want the grounds to be used for parking. Just one issue, for example. So we may be able to impose like a no parking thing, depending on climate or whatever. So just whether we do or not, it's an issue to consider. But there probably are other ones as well. So, and again, maybe whether it's a commitment for cleanup or stuff like that is what I'm suggesting. So an agreement in principle pending addressing or resolving any issues that might be identified. Thoughts?
Car show, not rally.
Car show. Excuse me, Bruce.
Who would contact me over those issues? Who would I be dealing with?
It would be staff. I hate to always go back to staff, but I'm happy to help out as well if staff.
Okay, no, that's fine.
Yeah.
That's
Okay.
No problem.
Okay. Great. Okay.
Second.
Okay. Seconded by Councillor. Yeah. Councillor Gray.
And just to add an issue, I'm wondering about the parking lot in front of the old school field. And we know that that parking lot is sometimes filled with vehicles, and I would like to suggest as part of the arrangement that's made that we reserve it for the use of the car event.
Mm-hmm.
That would put pressure on other tenants, of course, but the notion being if we want to do this, I think they need to have ready access and have control of that area. And I think we have the ability to do that in our lease arrangements.
Okay.
Is there any chance of using the community hall, or is that a different jurisdiction again? Parking.
Councillor Gray.
For parking.
I'm just thinking of the access to
Yeah,
the field.
that was great, Steve. I really hope that I could have that piece of property you're talking about.
Yeah, I don't have the calendar of the Mitchelson Hall with me tonight, but certainly that can be checked out.
Okay. Thanks
So
very
I guess
much.
my question, is there a different jurisdiction that looks after the community hall parking situation? Okay.
Great. Hearing no further comments, I will call the question. All in favor? And opposed? Not opposed? Thank you. Great. And we also have Mr. Enright's letter, and just in support of his very excellent presentation. And I would just make a motion to receive that.
I'll second that. Thank you.
And further comments? Councillor Gray. Okay. All in favor? Thanks. And there's no other business, so we can, if I could get a motion to adjourn this very long meeting. Councillor Craig.
Motion to adjourn.
As seconded by Mayor Little, and all in favor? Thank you. Thanks, Kerry.
Yeah, you betcha. Thank you.